What you are looking at are long-form AI films with consistent characters made completely on autopilot. And they're all created by this AI system that uses n8n and Google's insanely powerful Nanobanana model. Because in case you missed it, Nanobanana is now the #1 image editing model in the world. It has cracked the code on character consistency, and if you give it a single reference image, it's able to lock that character in across scenes. And so when you fuse this model into a long-form storytelling automation, then things get interesting. You can suddenly build a real audience and brand off of AI stories, like this channel with 240k subscribers, this channel with 1.63 million subs, or this creator with 800,000 plus followers on Instagram, and so many more examples if you just search on socials. Because what this system does once you have it scheduled every day or even every hour if you want to, is it first scans your reference image, then an AI agent builds a full story around that image. It generates professional voiceovers, scene artwork, which it then animates for every shot, uploads it to YouTube automatically, and you've got a finished film ready to watch.
What if Pokemon were real? Meet Charmander. Charmander's tail flame burns brightly, a sign of life. The fire at its tail measures its emotional state. As dusk falls, the weather starts to become chilly. And in cooler temperatures, its tail provides necessary warmth. It is cautious of nocturnal predators lurking nearby. Charmander stays in open areas to spot any danger. When the day is over, Charmander rests in the shelter of tree roots.
It's also great for children's stories.
Suddenly, majestic Mount Fuji appears in the horizon before Bluey.
Horror and folklore.
Night, crying for the children she lost.
Historical narratives.
Paris to study new styles and shape the vision that defined his later masterpieces.
Unsolved mysteries.
D.B. Cooper hijacked a plane, took $200,000 in ransom, and vanished without a trace.
Or even fresh takes on familiar stories and characters.
To freedom. What if Thanos became the crime boss of New York?
And what's more is you can use this system for product
Lax
videos.
fit with puff sleeves and a vibrant floral design for effortless comfort and style.
And B-roll for advertising.
The leak-proof bottle made for little hands and big adventures.
And honestly, the only ceiling left is your imagination. And here's the thing, what you're seeing right now is the worst that these AI generations will ever look, and demand for AI agents and automation is exploding if you just check Google Trends. So learning to build systems like this, which are all no code anyway so anyone can pick them up, is going to be one of the most valuable skills that you can learn. So take the time to watch this tutorial to the end and absorb all this knowledge, because this is how you master the next big wave of AI. If you're new here, my name is Jay. I run my own AI creative agency and also founded the RoboNuggets community, our education arm. We have several hundred members now who are all AI builders and practitioners across the globe. And here our mission is to make creating with AI easy to learn with the growing library of AI lessons that most people join for, but most members stay because of the strength of the community that we've built. So like always, to make this lesson easy, I've organized this workflow into steps, and I'll also be running through it node by node so that you can understand the principles of how to build it yourself. Because the framework of what we'll be setting up here can actually be simple if you think through it in steps, because at the very top, we just have a few nodes here to organize our inputs that will feed into our AI agent, who then makes the prompts for us, which is now automatically processed through these 4 steps. First, we'll create the voiceovers. Next, we'll create the images using Nanobanana, and then we'll animate those images in step 3, and then combine everything together automatically, and giving us the final video right after, with an option for you to automatically post it to YouTube if you want. And also, if you're completely new, this tool that we're using is called n8n. It's a no-code automation tool similar to Make.com or Zapier, but you can see how popular it's gotten because of how flexible it is to integrate a lot of these new AI tools, which if you need a free trial, you can just sign up through this link below. And if you're part of the community, you can also get 50% off just by using the code in our AI discounts page. And by the way, if you're a bit more advanced or need a shortcut, you can also get the template for this workflow just here in our community page. And if you download that, you can then import it to the no-code tool that we'll be using, and that will create the automation for you automatically. So what I'll be doing here is I'll be running through this workflow step by step, which I think is the best way to illustrate how this automation works. So I'll run this store prompts node, and I will explain later why that is important. And once that has finished processing, you can see that what it did is store some image prompts into this Google Sheet file. And for this specific run, we're going to illustrate a story for Bluey, which is an Australian cartoon. You'll see that in just a minute, we're going to animate and create 30 scenes for this specific video. And what our AI agent just gave us are 30 unique image prompts, as well as 30 unique voiceovers, as well well as video prompts for each of those scenes. And so later as we progress, you'll see those images and voiceovers be loaded into this sheet for our tracking. But obviously the big question is, how did we get these prompts so cleanly organized in the first place? Well, if we start with our input section here at the top, we just have a schedule trigger. And this is useful if you wanted to run, let's say, on a daily basis, but you can also use other triggers if you wish. But whenever this workflow runs, you have this Google Sheet node, which if I open it, it will show you n8n's common design of working, where basically for every node that you configure, you have this input section, which contains all of the data from previous nodes. You have this configuration section for the specific node that you are configuring. And then you have this output section, which now shows the output of this node. So here you can see we have a simple Google Sheet node to get our idea from this Google Sheet template, which is actually the Google Sheet template we were viewing before. But if you notice, our output prompts is actually loaded in Sheet 2. So where we're loading the idea from is from our main sheet, which is this sheet 1, which if we go there, you can see where you have some information here about the video we're about to create. These gray columns are inputs from the user that I will explain in a bit. And then finally, we have this production status column, which is what we use to determine which row we are going to do for this specific run of this automation. So if we go back to our Google Sheet node here, you can see that the only filter that we have here is checking if this column called production status has the value of create. So later, once we are finished with this idea, this automation will mark it as done. And then obviously this row will be skipped the next time it runs. We also have this option to return only the first matching row, so that let's say you have 10 ideas loaded here, we'll only always just process one row at a time. Because as you can see here, when this node ran, it basically got all of the information from that Google Sheet and loaded it into our n8n instance. But the question now becomes, how did we get this information in the first place? So obviously you can type it out yourself, but whenever you're doing tasks that require text, usually it's better to just offload it to language models like ChatGPT. So what we created here is this Ideator GPT for this system, which you can just find here in the link in our community resource page. And you'll see what I just did here is send it an image of the character that I want, and I just ask it to give me one idea featuring this character, and that for this specific video, I wanted to visit Japan. And so it gave me this visual table, which I can just copy by clicking this copy table, and I pasted it here. Now, obviously, when you use this GPT in practice, you're probably not going to do just one idea at a time. And so the real power behind it is if I ask it to give me 10 more ideas or maybe even 20 more ideas for this same theme, then it will just go ahead and do that. And once it's done, I can just copy this whole thing and paste it again here. So now instantly, I have like 10 more ideas that I can use for this same story and character. Now, obviously, in practice, you want to double check the output of your AI models. So for this Japan one, for example, I did amend it a bit so that it is aligned to what I want. But here you can see the GPT only filled it up until this column. So if we expand this, you'll see that we have a few more columns here in yellow that we need to fill up ourselves. Now, the great thing is once you have this first row locked in, you can just copy that whole thing and paste it here. Because most of the time, if you're just doing it for one niche, these same values apply as well. But before we get to that, what are these columns are in the first place? So later, as we progress through the automation, you'll see more of these in action. But just to explain each column, you have here a free text field for a special request by the user. So I just typed this in. Here at the end, we also have the number of scenes that we want to create. So earlier, if you remember, our agent created 30 prompts for us for 30 scenes. The reason why it did 30 is because we declared it as 30 here. Which, by the way, if you're just testing it out, I advise you to start with like 3 to 5 scenes just for you to get used to it more. I'm just doing 30 here just to illustrate that it can do that as well. And then you have the aspect ratio here, which I've set to 16:9 or landscape, but you also have the option to do this in 9:16. So those are the easy columns. Now, what are all these complex looking columns that we have here? Well, the first one is the voice ID, which is going to dictate the voice that will be used for the voiceover for the video, which for this system will be using 11 Labs, which is one of the leading text-to-speech platforms, which you can create an account for free. And if you go to their voices page, you can just browse the options that they have here. For this specific system, we'll want to go to the default voices one, and I'll show later why that is. And you can preview these one by one. And once you've chosen a voice, what you want to do is to just click this More Actions button at the right and copy that voice ID, which when you have that copied, you can just paste it here so that it's loaded into your system. So for this specific run, you can see that we are using this Jessica voice, which we can probably preview.
If you spend your whole life waiting for the storm, you'll never enjoy the sunshine.
And that is the voice that we'll be using. Now, the next column is this image reference, which is actually the image that we're going to use to be fed into Nanobanana so that it can refer to this image as our source of truth, if you will. So if I click on this URL, and it will take me to this .png file, which we can preview. And you can see this is just a picture of Bluey that I got from online. And you can see that the service we're using to host or upload this file is called Cloudinary. So if you go to Cloudinary, this is actually a useful tool for automators because they actually have a free tier where you don't even need to add your credit card in there. And you can see once we've signed up, you can just go to this assets section and you can upload a lot of assets here. You can see I already have a few things loaded here from our previous tests that we did. And this is also where I uploaded that Bluey image as reference. So what I did is to just do a right click and find this copy URL which I can click here. And that is basically how I got that URL. It's a very useful tool that we'll be using again in just a bit. Because if we go to this last column that we'll explain, it is the background music that we have the option to use. And that is an MP3 file that is also loaded in Cloudinary, specifically this file. So what I did is the same, where it's right click and copy that URL through here. Now, if you already have music to use, then that's great. You can just drop it in here. But if in case you don't, it's actually easy to get a background music for free. If you just head to suno.com, if you head to their create page, you can just describe your song here. And in fact, if you're using the GPT, we've programmed this so that it will actually give you a background music prompt suggestion that you can just copy paste into this. If you want it as instrumental, just stick that on and click on create. And you can see I have a lot of songs here already, which I can download through this button. And once I have this in my computer, I can just load them in Cloudinary and paste it here. Now, just a final tip regarding this column. You can see that I actually have this pretty long Excel formula loaded in this cell specifically. And what that basically does, if we go to sheet 3, is if in case you have 10 videos that you want to create and you want the background music to be different for each of those videos, you can just load all of your songs in here like what I did here. And then this formula will just randomize between those songs every time this automation runs. So when I refresh this, you can see right now it's Bluey 4 by random. But if I do that again, you can see that now it's Bluey 3. So it's all completely by random, essentially. And like I said, we can just copy that whole piece into these 10 rows. And now you have several ideas ready to go for each of your generations. Now, that seems like a lot of information, especially for the first node. But the thing with these workflows is that a lot of the quality of the final output actually depends on your inputs. And so having proper information here will just help you in the long run. And the good news is once we're done here, the following nodes are actually much easier to explain as well. So once we have those inputs loaded up, you'll remember that this get idea node just got all of those good information into our n8n run, including our voice ID, image reference, and background music. And it then passed all of those good information into this AI agent, which if you see its user prompt here, and if I just expand that, what we are basically doing is asking it to make a video with 30 scenes, which is a dynamic value. That's why it's green. We have that special request here, which you remember we provided in that Google Sheet row. We have the video title, we have the video description and caption, which helps the agent craft the tonality and the scenes for this story, as well as the visual style, the colors, and the channel description. So what we're basically doing is engineering the context to provide to this AI agent so that it knows what to do next. But obviously, apart from the user prompt, you also need a pretty robust system prompt so that the agent knows what to do with that information. So that's available here, which if you expand that, if I just zoom in, you'll see that we have a pretty robust system prompt here, which I can just go through. We're assigning it a role. We're giving it some guidelines, such as the fact that we want a narrative arc of a short video, some more guidelines for it, which you can read through. This is important because some of us may be using this for advertisements, and then we're just giving it a task where we are asking it to give us the following, which if I go back real quick, you can see here in the output, it basically gave us several sub-outputs here, which each of them, if you unfurl them, corresponds to one scene. So here it gave us scene 7 with a voiceover text, the image prompt, as well as the video prompt. So if you go through each of these 30 scenes, all of those output values have been consistently given to us by this agent. And the reason why it knows to give us that is because we declared it here for that scene count attribute. We also gave guidance around the voiceover, a guidance on the image prompt, and also guidance around the video prompt, and a few more critical requirements just so that it knows what not to do, for example. Which, by the way, if you are dialing this in for a specific use case, this system prompt is probably what you want to amend. Because right now, this is very general since a lot of people may be using this. But once that agent has finished processing our inputs, it gave us this big corpus of output, which is basically 30 scenes. So what we're doing next is to just split out all of those ideas. So if I open this, it basically took that one group of output and individualized it to 30 items. Because in n8n, if you want to create images for each of these scenes, then you want the items to be individualized as well. And then once you have those 30 items, we just have this step where we are taking those 30 scenes and storing it in our same Google Sheet. But this time we put it in sheet 2. And the reason why we want to do this is because with a lot of the AI tools now, you may find that you want to double check the prompts first before they get passed to an image model. So in practice, when you're testing this out, I suggest you do the same that I did, where I just played it up until this point so that you can also double check that the prompts that your agent has been giving you, as well as the voiceover text, is up to spec to what you want. And it will also help us later because later you'll see for this earlier run I did for the Charmander documentary, we'll actually be loading the images and voiceovers here as well. So if I select a random image here, what this sheet now allows you to do is save all of those images, which is important if you're using this, say, for advertising, because each of these images can still be useful to you. So with the prompts now ready, the next thing we'll do is to just run this next store images Google Sheet. And what that will do is run these next corpus of nodes, which we'll be also going through once they're done. So once that has finished processing, we now created our voiceovers for those 30 scenes as well as the images that is powered by Nanobanana. And with this final node that we just ran, what it just did is store those images and voiceovers into our sheet 2. So now for these 30 scenes, if we scroll to the right, You can now see links to the 30 images that Nanobanana created for us, which if we go to one random one, this one looks really good. That's basically Bluey in the Himeji Castle. We also have this one with Bluey seeing Mount Fuji, and we have 30 more of those all loaded here. And then the voiceovers are also here. So if we preview one of them,
Japan is famous for its beautiful castles like Himeji Castle.
and that is the voiceover that goes with the scene with that voice being created by 11 Labs. So how did those images and voices get created? Well, first what we did is to have this Google Sheet node, which will basically get the prompts again for us. You can see that its output is 30 items, which just correspond to the 30 image prompts that we have here in our Sheet 2. And the reason why we just need to do this step again is just to capture any changes that the user wants to make. So if, for example, we corrected some of the voice over texts here, then we want those changes to be loaded in n8n once we run this step. But now that we have those 30 prompts, we just pass it along to this call create voice sub-workflow first, which if we open that, you'll see that its output are 30 items which correspond to 30 MP3 files, which if you open all of those, that will just give you the voiceovers that we just created. So if we click on this link and view the sub-execution, that will take you to this sub-workflow, which is a pretty useful tool in n8n if you're creating with this platform. Because if you have other workflows that you need voiceovers for as well, then you can just call on this sub-workflow in order to generate them automatically. But basically what we have here is you can see those 30 prompts being passed as well. It's being sent to this HTTP request node, which if you open that, you can see that we are passing the request over to 11 Labs via the service called Fal AI. And if you go to Fal AI, they're basically an AI model aggregator, so kind of like an app store for AI models. So within their Explore page, you can see they have like hundreds of models here available for you to use. And if we search for 11 Labs text-to-speech, this is basically the model that we are using and is also the one that we are requesting the voiceovers from here. So you have the address to send your request to. What you should also have is the message in what you are sending, which is here in this body section, which if we expand this, you'll see that what we are passing here is this format that is as per Fal AI's documentation. And these green dynamic values, if I shuffle through them, you'll find that we are passing along those 30 scenes, which are all the voiceover text that is coming from that Google Sheet that we loaded from earlier. And then this is also where we are passing that voice ID that we selected in the very beginning. You can change these values and explore them if you want, but I did want to point out that 11 Labs does have this language code. So I've set it as English, but if you're looking for another language, this is where you change it. And with all HTTP requests, you also need to set up your credential, which is sort of like your stamp of approval that gives you the right to request from Fal AI's services. So in our previous videos or in our quick setup guide in our community, I also show how to set this up as well. But when that node ran, basically we submitted 30 items that are all now in queue. And so now we just have this final get voice node, which if we open that, we're basically just getting those 30 MP3 files via Fal AI's link, which you can get from their response URL that they provided you once you made those requests. But this is what we need because now we have these 30 MP3 files that we now pass along to this final node, which when you're working with a sub-workflow, the final node in this whole set, if we open that, the output here is what gets passed into your main workflow. So now if we go back to the main workflow, if I open this call create voice, you now see those 30 MP3 files loaded here as well. And so that's it for the voice. And now you'll find that this step 2 create image node functions similarly as well. So if I open this, you'll see that its output are also 30 items, but this time these are all the images from Nanobanana that we are about to animate. And again, if you go to the sub execution here, you'll find that we have a similar looking sub workflow where we are once again passing those 30 items or prompts, but now to this create image node, which if you open that, you'll see that we are using Nanobanana for this instance to generate our images, but we are doing it through this service called key.ai. And if you go to key.ai, they're very similar in services to Fal. They're also an AI model aggregator and they have Nanobanana in here. The reason why we are using their instance is because of their very competitive pricing. So it's only 2 cents per image. And if you're using their custom image sizing, that will become 3 cents, but that's still very, very cheap compared to other players in the market. And so that's why we're sending our request to Key AI this time. Similar to before, we just provide our stamp of approval via this credential, which I've shown in previous videos or in our quick setup page how to do. And same as before, we have this body, which is going to contain the message that we are sending to Key AI. And if we expand that, you can see that we just have here this structure as per Key AI's documentation where we are declaring the model we want to use, the prompt for the image, which again, we can shuffle through by clicking on this. This will be 30 in total, all unique. And then importantly, we have the image URL here, which if you remember, if I copy that and paste it in my browser tab, that's the image reference that we loaded in the very beginning in Cloudinary. And then finally, we have the image size here, which is 16 by 9 that we also loaded in the very beginning in our Google Sheet. And so when that request was passed, we now have 30 items here that Nanobanana in Key AI's instance is now creating for us. And so we just need to wait for those generations to finish. So this wait node is set to 60 seconds and this other wait node is set to 60 seconds as well for a total of 2 minutes, which I find is more than enough time for this generation. Now, the reason why we have 2 wait nodes here instead of just one and setting it as 120 seconds is because as of right now in n8n, there's some default time cap that it can only run for, I think something like 70 to 80 seconds per node. And if it exceeds that, it actually causes some errors down the line. And so to work around that, it's very simple. We just create 2 wait nodes to give our model enough time to generate. But after running this multiple times, I think 2 minutes is the sweet spot. And then we get the images back using this node, similar to what we did before. But with KAI, the URL that you get those images from is via here. Then you just pass it this task ID, which is a dynamic value. It's provided by KAI whenever you make a request from them. So if you go here in the right, you'll see now that we have 30 items back here, which contains all of the information that KAI is passing back to us. For some reason, the output that they have here is kind of messy. So in the next node here, you can see the purpose of this is to just get the file itself, which ends in .png, as our final cleaned up output. And so this just has an expression to parse through all of that data and just get this result URL, which you can see here. So it just ignored everything else because we don't really need that. But now we have these 30 images, which like before when this sub-workflow ended, it got passed back to this create image node. So if we open that, you'll remember that its final output are those 30 images as well. And that brings us to this store images node, which is when it ran, all it did is link back to our Google Sheets and update our sheet to load all of those images and voiceovers in their respective columns. And so now the reason why that's important, same as before, if you want, you can inspect each of these images before animating them with video prompts so that you can make sure that the images and voiceovers are to your liking before we animate them. Which now brings us to the final step, which is to take those images and animate them. So if we just run this final Google Sheet node, that will now call on the next corpus of nodes that we'll be going through. And when that finished running, what it did is update our Google Sheet to set the production status as done and also load the URL of the final output in here, which if we click on that, it will download it and we can now watch it.
Bluey arrives in Tokyo, Japan's bustling capital city. Japan has vending machines everywhere. Bluey learns origami, the Japanese art of paper folding. Explores old samurai villages in Japan. People in Japan love to visit hot springs called onsen. Castle lights of Tokyo by night. In Japan, rice is the main food and base for sushi. Bluey visits an aquarium filled with colorful sea creatures. Japanese gardens have paths lined with stepping stones. Bluey attends a fun-filled Japanese drumming lesson. Fireworks brighten the sky during Japan's summer festivals. Bluey discovers Japan's traditional ink painting art. Bluey bids Japan farewell, ready for the next adventure.
And there you go. That is really good. So you can see there's 150 seconds here corresponding to the 30 scenes that we generated, which are each 5 seconds long. Now, in reality, there's still some artifacting involved because this is still AI, but we are getting very, very close for it to be looking like an actual cartoon, right? Like a lot of those shots, you couldn't probably tell that it was generated by AI. So now if we go back to our workflow, how did we get from our images and voiceovers and create videos for each of them and then combine all of those clips together? Well, what we basically did is after storing all of those images, we just have another Google Sheet node in here, which if we open that, that's once again connected to our document. And all this really did is get those 30 rows again from our sheet too. And the reason why we want to do that is just to capture any changes that the user makes again. For example, there are some images that you are not satisfied with. You can actually replace them in this sheet before continuing this workflow so that those changes get captured. Same with the video prompts. This is your last chance to check the video prompts before it gets passed to the model. But once we have those 30 items, we just pass them into this create video sub-workflow, which similar to before, it outputs now the .mp4 files for each of those scenes that we described. So if we view the sub-execution for this, you'll see that this create video sub-workflow is also similar to the last ones, but we just have 2 options for the models here. The first model is called One, which is from Alibaba. They're actually the cheapest available here at only 6 cents per clip, but I just found that their capabilities are not as good versus this other model called Cdance. And if you're not aware, Cdance is actually from the company behind TikTok called ByteDance. And for a while, they were actually the top video model out there, even defeating Veo. But we're just using them in this case so that we can illustrate because they're actually quite cheap at only 15 15 cents per clip compared to VO3 Fast, which is 40 cents. This is actually much more economical for this use case whenever you want to do long form. And it's also cheaper because it doesn't output audio, which we don't need at least for this specific system. And so what we're doing is we're just sending another HTTP request. Again, we're sending it to Key AI, the service that we used just for the images before. But this time, if you go to the body, if we expand that, you'll see that this time we are using this ByteDance image to video, which is pretty much CDance under the hood. And we have this structure given by Key AI to us where we are passing along the image URL, which again, if I shuffle through this, you'll find the 30 images that Nanobanana generated for us. And then we also have this prompt. When I shuffle through it, it also shuffles through this prompt, but at least for this specific run, what I loaded in that G sheet is just the same prompt, which is animating this image with minimal movement, camera is fixed. But you can obviously change it to whatever that you want. And so when this node ran, what we got are 30 items, which are corresponding to the 30 tasks that CDance is now creating videos for us. And so we just have a couple of wait nodes here because videos take a longer time to execute. Each of those are 60 seconds as well. And then same reason as before, we just duplicate it 4 times just to avoid that n8n sub-workflow issue. And then finally, once we have waited enough time, we have this get video node where we get those final videos from key.ai. It gives us 30 of these objects in return, which are kind of messy. And so in the final edit fields node, we just have this simple expression in order to parse through that and get these MP4 files in return, which if we go back to our workflow, you'll remember that this create video node, that is the final output that it provided us as well. So now with the videos ready, we now call this combine clips to put everything together. So if I open that, you can see that the output of it is this video URL, which is the final video that we just showed. But if we go to the sub execution of that and we copy this to our editor so that we can see it cleanly, you'll now see that we have 2 specific tasks here. One to combine the clips together, so 30 scenes, stitch them all together, and another row to add subtitles to it if you need subtitles. But the way to use these models is you actually need to aggregate all those 30 scenes into one item because you need to pass them together. And so we just have this aggregate node, which if you open that, we're just getting the videos as well as the voiceovers from our main workflow. And as an output here, it gave us all of the videos, one for each scene. So there's 30 in here. And then the voiceovers as well, all MP3 files. And you can see there's 30 in here as well. And so with all of that grouped, we just have this extra code node in order to create our FFmpeg command. Because FFmpeg, if in case you don't know, is actually one of the most trusted ways to automatically edit videos. They've been around since like 24 years ago. And so this next node that we are going to call is actually connected to FFmpeg in order to stitch those scenes automatically. And so this node, if I just open that, what it basically does is take all of these videos and just organize them in this format, but it does it through this specific JavaScript code. Now, I didn't write this myself. I just asked ChatGPT to write this for me. And when I tested it, I got the output that I wanted, which I now pass to this combine clips node. So if we open this, you can see that it's a request to FFmpeg, again hosted via file.ai. So they have this model as well that basically lets us compose the final video together using specific scenes. And so if I head to the body in here and then just expand that, you'll see that we're passing along 3 dynamic values here. One is the script for the videos, which we got from the previous code node. So when using this FFmpeg tool by file AI, we have this video track where we are passing along this first video, and then we pass along this second scene, and then this third scene. And if I just scroll down there, all of those will be in total 30 scenes for the 30 videos that we are hoping to pass. And then you have the second dynamic object here, which is now for the audio. So if I zoom in here, you have the audio for scene 1, followed by scene 2, and so on and so forth, up until we get to the final scene here in the end. So it's just a specific format that File AI's FFmpeg is needing. And then this final piece is just for the background music. So if you remember, when we uploaded our background music in Cloudinary, we loaded that in n8n via that very first Google Sheet node. This is now where it's used. So you can see that is the Bluey Goes to Japan MP3 soundtrack from earlier. But that is now what we passed. So when this node executed, you can see that this request is in queue. We have a wait node here, which I think is set at 40 seconds. And then we just have this final node to get that final video. So since this is File AI, we are just getting this video coming from this response URL that File AI gave us. And then we just have an error handling here because if in case that task is not yet finished, you can actually loop back to the wait node here and just check if it's done already. And this looping we can do because we are only dealing with one item. But when that final video is successful, it now calls on this final model, which is the auto captioning tool, which if we open that, you can see this is once again hosted by File AI using their auto captioning model, which if we scroll down, the request we are sending looks like this. And this is again as per File AI's structure, where you have the video URL, which if I paste this in our browser, that would download the video but without the subtitles yet. And we are passing along that video along with these commands. So we want the subtitle to be white in color. We want the font size and the alignment to be like so. And we are also passing along a font file, which you can see we uploaded as well in Cloudinary. So if you want to tweak this and also want to understand how to edit them, you can actually just go to File AI's auto captioning page. And then here under additional settings, you can just view the information here for some of the options for the fonts that you can just declare, like you can type in Arial, Standard, and so on, or you can pass in this TTF font file if you want a custom one. But when that node ran, you'll see our request for this captioning is now in queue as well. We have another wait node similar to the one above. And then we just get the final video now with subtitles like we did before. And you can see here, we now have the final MP4 file, which is the same one that we loaded into that Google Sheet. Because the final step here is just this edit fields node, which just directly gets that video URL to pass along back to the main workflow. Now, a handy tip, if in case you don't want any subtitles, all you really need to do is to select all of these nodes and deactivate them by clicking on D, and then map this success node into this edit fields so that instead of getting the video URL from this one with the subtitles, you just get the video URL from this final video. So if I open this, you'll see that this expression, if I expand that, now maps to this earlier video file without the subtitles. But anyway, now if we go back to the main workflow, remember that this combined clips, if we open that, it just gave us the final video URL. And so the very last step here is to just load it back into the Google Sheet template that we have. And you can see here that what it basically did is mark that production status as done and mark the final output to load that final video in there. Now, auto-publishing to YouTube is optional because automating publishing is more for advanced creators just to avoid the risk of being shadow banned. But just to illustrate it, you can actually extend this workflow to auto-post to YouTube. Basically, what this node will do is to get the video file from that link we generated and then upload it to YouTube. So if we expand this, you'll see that that is successful. And if in case you want to dive deep into setting that up, you can just watch this video from before. Or if you want to learn how to automate it for other platforms apart from YouTube, then this lesson is what you would want to look at as well. But there you go. That is the whole system in full. And one of the great things about this system and the way this industry is moving is the costs are actually going down as time goes on. So here I just summarized the variable costs for this. So you can see with Nanobanana, it's 3 cents per image. 11 Labs via File AI is roughly 5 cents for around a minute of speaking. With Cdance, as mentioned, it's 15 cents per video, or you can also try out one at 6 cents. And then the subtitling is only 10 cents. And then the combining of the scenes is very cheap. It does vary, but it's usually less than 1 cent. So it's almost free. And then the background music, you can pretty much get that for free using the method that I showed. Obviously, there are some fixed costs like n8n, but if you're already using n8n anyway, then that is non-incremental. Or you can also use the free trial if you are a beginner. And if you want to grab this template as well as all the resources plus some extra discount codes for a lot of these tools, check out the RoboNuggets community just in the link below. There's tons more lessons here around AI and artificial intelligence to let you master this important skill in this new age. And our members and myself also post regularly paid opportunities here and partnership collabs if that's something that you are after, if you want to get started with earning from AI. And also you get to meet AI practitioners globally. Sometimes we do these in real life meetups where we sponsor and cover the costs of their food and drinks. So these meetups happen just to incentivize those members who make the effort to meet with others. But see if that's for you just in the link below. And if you like this video, consider subscribing because that helps us a lot to put out more content like this in this platform as well. That's it for this one. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.